Okay, so let's talk about massing for a second. So you can see that there's a second story piece in the middle. This is like a 1.5 or a 1 story piece. And this is like a 1.5 and 1 story piece as well. So the gable actually starts at the wall plate of the first floor. And then this one starts at the second floor top plate. So basically we have this piece. Call that our entry. That's our entry or our main mass. And then we have these other pieces here, which are sort of secondary to this on the left and right. And this creates an effect visually. The larger mass in the center, and then it'll tear down to smaller masses on the left and right. This is what I normally do on almost all the houses that I design. Especially when I have a wide footprint like this one. This house isn't very deep, but it's very wide. So I have to, make sure that I'm not making this facade one straight continuous heighted piece, so it doesn't look like, like a row of townhouses. It's more articulate and it's broken down. You'll also notice that I changed the ridge heights here, so there'll be a step down there, and then from here, there's a big step down there. But even at the entry, so this ridge is even higher than the main mass on this side, and this makes the entry piece more substantial looking. So you can tell that I only put transoms on the entry piece, and this is to raise the height and the look of this one piece here, so that your eye kind of goes to this first. So you can see the transoms are here. Each gable is treated the same, so it has this piece above it of lap siding here, which goes against the board and batten look. And I think that looks really good when you have sort of a different material in the peak of the gable above the windows that sort of intersects with that board and batten look. And I sometimes like to use gutter lines to create, sort of a difference in the facade. So this entry piece is sort of broken off and put to the side from this piece that's here because of this gutter line. So it almost creates like a break line where if you would actually make, sort of like a jut in, like 1.6 or 2 feet, but you don't even have to do that sort of break in the facade. You can just do a gutter. So what I did was I changed the ridge height. This is a higher ridge than this. I created a separation with the gutter. I made the actual top plate of where this gable catches the top plate higher. So this looks higher, this is lower. These shed roofs are actually the same top plate height as this gable, but because of the main gable coming down all the way to here, it creates this differentiation. And also this detail right here is really important. So I always make sure to have at least like 1 foot or 1.6 of siding from the roof to the bottom of the fascia here, so that it creates that little, you have that little niche nook. And the reason I always try to make the entry, a little bit taller and a little bit more substantial fenestration wise, it's because, I don't want this entry to be fighting with a piece that's over here, the same height, with the same amount of windows. I want like a harmonious sort of look where this is the tallest point, and then after that, it sort of just goes down, 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 all the way down to separate pieces. So it's kind of like a pyramid almost, like it all tears down to one level. This house is actually on a crawl space, so there's a little area here. There's a ledger board that goes all the way around, that has a little piece of trim on it that goes all the way around. Another thing I did was actually with the board and batten. So you can only order board and batten a certain length usually until it gets like super pricey. So I always try to make a break line that sort of makes sense with the fascia that's adjacent, or some sort of trim piece that I had to follow through with another detail that I did. So that usually follows through all the way throughout the facade. So here I did a step down, so I had to drop that line that goes like here. And then that stopped there. This house really only has gable details and shed roof details. So you'll see there's only really 2 reverse gables on the front facade, and I did this on purpose. So I don't want it to be too busy looking on the front. I felt that I wanted to do a gable at the entry to sort of create that nice entrance, but then also soften this one gable with another one here. Because if I only had one gable and then the rest shed, it really wouldn't, I feel like it wouldn't be a balanced composition for the whole thing. So that's why I put this one here. I didn't make it as tall as this one. I already told you about that. All right, so another detail that's really important to get right is this shed roof detail here. So to make this look correct, there's really only one thing you have to worry about. Let's say I'm drawing a section. This is your top plate. This is your rafter. And say your window is here. And then this is your floor system. So what you want to do is if this shed goes like this, you want your main gable to come down, and you want it to be about halfway through this window, at least. So as you can see, this fascia ends up being at the lower point of this window, or you could do towards the middle. So you can see this one ends up right at the middle of the window. And this makes sure there's no detail where you have a shed roof that, sort of looks like this. And you'll see this around a lot. If you're looking at it head on, you'll see the fascia there. This is a roof. They'll put the window like down here. And then you end up with this, this big space up here, which just looks incorrect because they got this point correct, but they didn't get where the window should sit within this entire system. And that's the most important part of that entire detail, is that you drop this top plate low enough so that this looks correct. Another thing to note is that this main mass is sort of pushed forward from these pieces, and these pieces are set back, and this is intentional as well. So as you can see, this roof that comes down, it's not gonna go, this fascia board, wherever it ends up, it's not gonna go past this piece of the facade, because that's not gonna look good if this comes past this facade piece. Especially with gutters, you want your gutter to die into this wall. So as you can see, throughout this facade, I also have these shed details. So I have a little shed roof here, we have these little dormers, shed roofs. There's another shed roof here, and then there's another detail right here that kind of pops off. And this sort of creates a balance. So there's, shed roof, shed roof, shed roof, shed roof. I try to just balance it across the facade. And then on the entry piece, we have a shed roof, but it's, it's curved to create, sort of like a more interesting piece for the entry. And every time I do have a shed detail like this, I always make sure I ground it. So I have these corbels or brackets that always come off and they attach to the wall. And this makes sure that this piece doesn't look like it's just floating in space. It grabs these corbels and brackets and then it brings it right down to the ground. Visually, not, actually, but, well, actually too, but visually is more important, I feel like, for this detail. And then it brings it down, everywhere you see. And that's how you sort of end up with this. So you have this, this piece that kind of looks heavy. If I just had this heavy piece here with no brackets, it would look very weird. So, you do the brackets, this helps bring back all this weight down to the ground, which is, super important visually for this house. And there's that sweeping porch roof. And also really quick on that shed detail. So it's really important, this main gable, this main gable rafter that sort of is beyond, that top plate height usually is going to be about 5 or 6 feet. So let's just say 6 feet now. But then your actual, the dormer where it ends up, this sort of shed roof where this top plate ends up, is your actual ceiling height that's upstairs. So say you have a 9-foot ceiling height up there. That's going to be 9 feet there. The problem is people don't like this, this little detail where it's 6 feet, because who wants a 6-foot ceiling? So what you do is you create a knee wall, and the farther you go back on this rafter, the higher the ceiling height will be. So what's typical is you do a knee wall that's about 8 feet tall, and then you have this sort of tray piece, and then this is the actual ceiling system. So you'll have a wall here. And you have like this little tray piece that comes up. And this is a very common detail. And then inside the house, you'll have this little alcove for this dormer piece. Another thing is I always put larger windows on the first story and then smaller windows on the second story. I mean, and that's just architecture 101, I feel like, but I only do larger windows like this when it's on a double height entry space or something like that, and I can, you know, do a larger door like this. This is probably a 8-foot door, and then this is like 8 feet of windows, you know, a 6-foot window with 2-foot transom. So these sort of match up height-wise, which I try to stay away from, but in certain cases I do this. Now, if I'm doing like an upside down house where the floor plan is sort of flip-flopped, where I have the entertaining space up here and then the sleeping space down here because there's, you know, some sort of water view or something, then I'll do larger windows up here than down here usually, or I'll keep them equal. And on these railings, the client wanted a black metal railing. And as you can see, we have like wood details in the crawl space. These are louvers. So I wanted to create a sort of lighter railing than just a solid black railing. So we put the top piece as wood. So this will be, you know, a wood top to these railings here with a black actual structural piece here. And this creates, you know, sort of a lighter feeling to this railing instead of it being all black. One other thing too is the windows. So in between all the windows, they aren't mulled together. There's actually 4 inches of trim that goes in between all of these windows. There's really only 4 instances where this happens on the facade. So between every window, instead of having them all mulled together, I have this break line of trim. And this is a common detail in actually historical homes, and I like to keep that sort of classical detail in between the windows to create that separation. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this house. Comment below, let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Yeah, and guys, I do consultations for this kind of stuff all the time, so if you have a new build or a renovation and you want some sort of initial idea to sort of get a jump from, give me a call. My information's down below. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this house. I'll see you guys in the next one.